Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Business from the Bass Boat Podcast. I am your host, Adam Deacon. And guys, a lot of changes in the industry right now. We're seeing new tours come up left and right. Super exciting times. And tonight's show, I am joined by Jake Boomer. Jake is the founder and the president of Alpha Angler. It's a 100% USA-made rod company. I personally have never used them. The best description that I've heard talking to a friend that has is it's as close as you can get to a custom rod without a custom built rod for you. So super excited to talk to Jake today, hear about how he got started in the industry and where he has taken Alpha Angler. So guys, without further ado, let's bring Jake in. Jake, welcome to the podcast, man. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. You're up in, are you still in Washington there in Spokane?
Yeah, Spokane, Washington.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Couple miles from the Idaho border. We always have a joke that if I could pick my house up and move it 7 miles, I would.
Yeah?
Yeah, dump it on the other side of the border, but yeah, we're real close.
Yeah, I got you. So I have been close to there. I didn't get to go to Coeur d'Alene or, some of those awesome lakes up there. I fished a high school way back in the day, a high school regional, kind of the Bass Nation stuff on, oh gosh, I'm trying to think. It was a river. It was in Trout Creek, Montana. So it was even farther.
Oh, Noxon Reservoir.
There you go. That's exactly what it was. Are you familiar with that place?
I have. I did a qualifier there a couple of years ago, 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I made the Montana State team and didn't get to go to regionals last year because of my daughter got quarantined, so I got stuck at home. So that was crazy. But Noxon is we have a joke around here, not a joke, but you get to go back 10 years when you go there. It's kind of peaceful, right? The place is a little bit farther behind, just amazing, beautiful. Kids love it there. So yeah, Noxon Reservoir.
Dude, yeah, it was incredible. I being from Colorado, see a lot of wildlife, but man, I saw everything on my like within a 50-mile stretch of that place. I saw mule deer, I saw whitetails, I saw elk, I saw black bear, I saw a guy ran into a mountain lion flipping a beaver hut. The mountain lion was behind the beaver hut chewing on the beaver. It was crazy. Turkeys, I saw everything. It was a cool fish. We ended up doing pretty well, catching smallmouth and largemouth, but it was just it was a little river, narrow fisheries, neat place.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's like it's one of those old towns where like the bar is also the restaurant, is the church on Sundays, it's cool. Everybody knows each other. Cool little town.
Exactly, man. Very cool. Well, sweet, man. Well, I think a lot of people don't realize, obviously I think Brandon Palanuik has kind of put some, I guess, emphasis on where you're from or that area in general, how much solid bass fishing there really is. I guess talk a little bit about some of the fisheries that you're near, being from where you're from.
Yeah, I mean, the Northwest, I always joke, is kind of landlocked from the rest of the world. Everywhere we go is 15 or 20 hours, but we do have an amazing bunch of fisheries, and they're pretty diverse too, right? We have my personal favorites, the Columbia River, but everybody knows about Coeur d'Alene. Brandon put that lake on the map. But we just have some really cool, a lot of desert type stuff. You know what I mean? It's super diverse. You can go anywhere. The cool thing for us is, you can get to like Shasta, which is Northern California, and get into spots. But we don't have spots up here. But we have a very, very competitive group of tournament anglers. And I call it the Shark Tank, because you have these guys that it's really hard for them to go fish a BFL or something else like that. And so they end up really just kind of eating each other alive in the tank, that nobody goes anywhere. So the guys that get really good and they put their heart and soul into it, they just stand there, they just beat each other to death up here. So, but I think it's a good training ground probably for when you do get to leave. But we kind of have a joke. There's only two guys that ever made it out of the Shark Tank, Pollinick and Luke Clausen, right? I mean, there's other guys that have, but the two guys that we know, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Do you know a kid named Lauren Torek?
I do. Yeah. Lauren's a good angler, good kid too.
Good angler. Yeah, I met him at that tournament, and we've stayed buddies since. And you know, he's made that TBF national a couple times, and uh, that's sweet. It's cool.
Yeah, good
Small
kid.
world.
The only thing about him is I think he went to Boise State, so I
He
give him
did
a
go.
little bit, yeah, a couple notches down. Other than that, I think he's a real good kid.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, let's get into it. So your experience, you know, kind of introduced you in the beginning of the show, but uh, you kind of off the air, we talked about your experience kind of in the outdoor industry. Um, Tell the viewers a little bit about your background and how you kind of started to form the idea of Alpha Angler.
Yeah, professionally, my outdoor background would have been I worked for Buck Knives, which is the famous cutlery company, and I still work for them a little bit, doing e-com stuff. But just a total awesome outdoor company. They have a manufacturing plant in Idaho. It's cool to see that. It's cool to see the passion of the employees and the people that are there. And so I was working there, and somebody got me into bass fishing. Actually, Luke Clausen's old team partner took me bass fishing one day, like 10 or 15 years ago, and that was it. It was the downhill slide from there. You know what I mean? And you kind of play that game where you're starting to fish competitively. I got indoctrinated into the Northwest Shark Tank, and and I have an engineering degree, from my schooling, but it's with computer engineering, which I didn't do a ton of,
Okay.
as I got out of, I was working when I was working for Buck. I wasn't a computer engineer. I was an IT guy, but I think I started tinkering with rods. That I think it was Mudhole that had a lot of videos and kind of taught people how to make rods. So that was probably 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I started kind of building rods just because the better mousetrap thought process. So yeah. And that kind of evolved, and we can tell the story about Alpha Angler because it really was somewhat of a hobby, and then as we started competing more and more up here, we started using we started selling a few rods to the locals. So the guys that were fishing a lot, guys would come up with a technique and they'd say, hey, can you build me a frog rod that does this? Or can you build me, something of that nature? And that's kind of where it started. And it kind of started to evolve into what it is now. I would have never told you 15, 12 years ago that it would be Alpha Angler like it is today, but
very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
And if I recall, I don't know if Mudhole still does that, but I remember seeing like Mudhole was kind of a company, right, where you could get parts and build your own custom rods. Was that their kind of model, or is that still?
Yeah. And they still do it. They do a really good job. I mean, that whole custom rod builder market, in my opinion, has Mudhole's a great source. Bassett Enterprise is a great source. These guys have created. You get these guys that are at home coming up with ideas, and in my opinion, I think it's the custom builders that kind of pioneered the split grips and the split reel seats and micro guides and a lot of the things that we see now. I think those were kind of brought to the forefront through the custom rod. Those guys at home with a little mini bandsaw cutting up reel seats, trying to cut weight and trying to create those types of things. And Mudhole, that's where they get a lot of their parts. There's a couple other different companies, but Mudhole's still very big in the game. I mean, a lot of custom guys buy stuff from them. I mean, we still buy, I think my custom wrappers still buy their glue from them and stuff. You know what I mean? They're pretty big.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I guess through that process, you're starting to build rods. People are starting to look at, especially locals are saying, hey, can you build a rod to do this? Can you do that? When did you kind of feel like, hey, we might be onto something here with this kind of small batch situation that we're building? What made you decide to turn it into a career?
I'll be honest with you. My faith kind of did. I had this passion for fishing and really wanted to be part of the fishing industry. And so that's kind of where it started, like knowing that you could, that they don't ever want to get to 55 years old and realize that you wish you would have done something different. And so there was this like set of coincidences that kind of got us there. Cause I was loving fishing up here and, things were going really well. And it was two things that did it. It was, the first thing was, I think about 2015, Pollinick, who's a good buddy of mine, calls me up and says, "Hey, we need to take this to the next level. You need to get these rods out. We had a really good format where all of our rod designs were coming from angler input. If there was a guy up here that was amazing smallmouth fisherman, and he won boat after boat on a fluke, and he had a very specific need. So we designed a rod for him, and by going that route, we were seeing that we were creating products that people could really utilize. So that was the first thing. Was Brandon called me in 2015 and said, "Hey, we got to try this." He wanted to be part of it. He wanted to kind of help with the designs because he's such a tinkerer. But the second thing was we went to the Bass. I think it was the very first time they had the Bass Team Championship. I don't know if you remember that, but they still have it now. The team tournaments, and we're so team tournament oriented down here or up here. They gave our area the ability to go, and me and my team partner made it that year. And the minute I saw, it was like 176 boats. There's a little lake in Arkansas called DeGray Lake. The minute I got a taste of that, I was done. Yeah, I mean, just like floating around in the morning with all those guys on a lake I'd never seen. That was like, you could sleep at night. I wanted to get back to that event. I wanted to fish everything I possibly could. And so it was those two things, I think, that really the launching pad, that fueled that passion that you got to do something else. I wanted to be part of the industry because as much as we like to complain about everything we're all part of as kind of a society, the fishing industry is pretty awesome. And it goes through its ups and downs. It has its ins and outs, but it's cool to be. I mean, like, you can talk to a guy you've never even met about fishing for an hour. You know what I mean? And never say a bad thing. Hours. Yeah. Jig conversations for hours. So
yeah. And then what's crazy is you learn something new from everyone too, man. It's such a special thing. And to me, that's, similar to the reason I started this podcast, right? Is, I think you gotta be doing something you're passionate about. And with that, you're going to be willing to put in the hours, put in the time that it takes to build something. And like you said, you don't want to wake up at 55 and say, I never did anything that I really, really wanted to do or wanted to be a part of. I think that's a big driver for a lot of guys in this industry.
Yeah, totally. And I think that when you're done, if you bust your butt all day long and you're done and you're still excited, and not every day is perfect. I think the biggest thing that I've realized in going after, working for an awesome company and being taken care of and all that kind of stuff, you kind of go like, what could I do? And a lot of people, they see that, hey, you went and did your own thing. And one of the guys we work with is always like, you work your whole life, you work your butt off for 20 years, and all of a sudden you're an instant success, is the theology, right? And it really is. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's definitely worth it. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of reward in, building stuff that people like to use.
Heck yeah. Awesome. Well, and I guess kind of transitioning too with your passion in tournament fishing, man, you're about to make a big step this year and fish the new NPFL.
I did. Paul Benson actually invited me when we were at the Classic this last year. And that I had fished the Opens this year and got my head kicked in. Just the other side of the world. But it's a pretty good motivator. Not always is a great motivator, but for us, the one thing that I realized is getting to the east side of the country and really learning that stuff is such a necessity. You know what I mean? We have a vlog video we're about to release of Brandon and I talking about fishing the Alabama shake. And it just I said, how often did you ever Alabama shake before you went?
You're talking about like a jig?
Shaking a jig. And I remember him looking at me, he goes like, we don't Alabama shake up here. I had to go over there to learn it. So it's like the divide. We've got to cross the divide and learn it. And MPFL is a really cool platform, that letting the working man stay in it. So I like the way they've set everything up. It was pretty hard to say no. And I actually roped a buddy, Bryant Smith, who's a California hammer, into traveling with me. So yeah, there's a couple other West Coast guys, and we're going to wear out some pickup tires, Adam.
Heck yeah, you are, dude.
Yes, we are.
That's awesome. Yeah, man. I've always thought the same thing, being from Colorado, have been able to fish decently around the country just with college fishing and high school national championships and that kind of stuff. And it's like, it's a different world. You go to some of those places and you're like, well, I know a bass eats this, but it's like, there's certain nuances that every region has. And it can be extremely difficult, like to go somewhere that you've never been and try and figure them out. And it just takes time and getting your head kicked in, that kind of a thing. it's a process, right? I mean, there's very few guys that can go out and make it happen so fast. And I think that it's just a learning process that takes time, and that's what you're doing.
Yeah, totally. Because we were at my favorite story about all of last year is Brandon fished and we all kind of stayed together in the campgrounds, and he's a good coach, right? You know, he can turn nothing into 20 pounds in 5 minutes. And I think he was sitting there talking to a couple of us, and he says, you know what, if it goes bad, Jake, just fish what looks good. And I'm walking away from the conversation. I've never seen water willow in my life. I've never seen a Coosa River impoundment. And I remember the thought was like, oh, that's good advice. But what if nothing looks good? Like thanks, Brandon. Yeah.
Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah. Stud. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, man, so, I guess at this point you're going to be on the road a ton, right? With it. I mean, you are going to they've got 6 events, right? And the first one here is mid-March, right? On Lake Eufaula.
Yep.
How excited are you to get things going, and what challenges do you see ahead with running your company and being on the road?
Yeah. Well, where do I start? The blessing that I have is I have this killer general manager who is actually my dad. A lot of people don't know that, but I hired him. He retired early because he's 10 times smarter than I am. And he was home for 2 weeks. I think he painted the house twice. My mom's like, oh no, you're going to get a job. So yeah, I scooped him up to run all the operations from Alpha, and he's a genius. And he manages a lot of the day-to-day stuff, which is a blessing to me because then I can go fishing. Right. Yeah. And so luckily he's really shaped. He really navigated the COVID situation really well. I think a lot of people panicked for that. And he did a really good job of keeping our relationships open. We have great vendors. And so he's kind of taking care of the Alpha side of things. It's not always easy, but that helps if I'm going to be traveling. And then, as far as logistics go, I've just decided to leave all my stuff over on the East Coast, just leave it with friends and fly back and forth. And so,
gotcha.
Doing the opens, going back and forth was a real challenge. And I have a couple little girls that are kind of getting in that age where they need their dad around to whoop them, So trying to plan, like, what would life look like? I mean, MPFL did an amazing thing where they struggled to get 4 weeks between every event. Whereas if you lived on the East Coast, that's so awesome that they did that. If you live on the West Coast, it stinks because it takes 2.5 days to get down there and 2.5 to get back. And so I'm gonna have to fly back and forth. So I got a little aluminum duck boat I'm gonna outfit to fish when I'm back at home, because I know I want to be part of that over here, but I'm gonna leave it over there is what I'm gonna do. Yeah,
you got to have your little dinghy in the shark tank.
Yeah, that's right, and that's what it would feel like too. Yeah.
Sweet. Well, I think that's really smart that you're doing that, because man, the drives, man, and for you, like, I mean, my farthest drive, I fished Clear Lake in a tournament, so that was far from me. I think that was 20 or little over 20, and then Kentucky Lake's like 19, 20, same kind of deal. But for you could, like, I mean, Florida, I mean, luckily this first one, well, Alabama's not that much. No. You're still looking at a couple day haul for sure.
Yeah, all the guys on the forums were talking about how excited they were. They put Harris chain on there, and I'm like, other than Hawaii, I don't know how much farther we could get away from each other. You know what I mean? Like, no, not Harris chain. Yeah.
Dang, man. Dang. Yeah. Well, sweet. I guess let's transition here into a little bit about kind of Alpha Angler specifically. What an entirely USA rod. I think that made in the USA can be kind of strung different ways. What does that mean? What does an entirely USA built rod mean?
Well, I can't say that we're entirely USA, so I got to make sure that I mean, you could get sued for that these days. There's not a USA guide manufacturer, somebody that actually makes guides in the United States, but there's quite a few guys in the industry that would really like to see that. And cool. A couple of us have talked about funding a company that would make a USA made guide. Some stuff you just can't do domestically very easy. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, I mean, like the Fuji stuff like that, those are pioneered through the Japanese fishing side of things. And so you kind of you can't say 100% USA made. So yeah, we'll buy components from like Fuji or In all honesty, if somebody made a blank that was made in Istanbul and it was the best frog rod on the planet, I would put it in our product. I would 100% tell everybody it's made. This is where I got it. Because the goal is we just make whatever we can figure out is the best for whatever you're doing. That's kind of the goal. But I did want all of the manufacturing of the actual rods to stay domestic. That came from the buck background. It's pretty cool to see how proud those guys are when they make a knife and they bust their butts. The buck knives guys, and that was kind of an inspiration for me. But then just kind of like you said, having control of the product. We don't want to build 100,000 rods a year. We really want to try to build them the best we can and kind of keep them close to the vest. So and what that allows us to do is everything, right? If somebody comes out with a better guide that's just all across the board better, it's easy for me to just implement it and put it into the products, right? Just something better that there would be no stoppage to changing things for the better of the product.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, if something is going to revolutionize, we get some new guide that comes out that's just incredible, you would be doing a disservice to your cut, if that's a word. I don't know if that's a word, but you would be hindering your customers, right? I mean,
totally. The alphas, we call them.
The alphas, man. I like that.
We like the alphas. It's funny because the MPFL guys want me to send them my fishing page. Like, hey, what's your Jake Boomer fishing page? I don't have one. I'm a part of the alphas. I never created a fishing page to draw attention to me as a person, because I think alpha is a lot more interesting. And the cool thing like alpha is that the guys that are on it, that are part of it, it's funny how many of them are our friends. Like I'll be driving down the road and my phone will ring and it's, from Iowa. And I've never, I don't even know if I've been to Iowa. But I'm talking to this person. My wife's like, how did you know that guy so well? He's an alpha. We've been talking about jigs for the last 2 weeks. You know what I mean? How do you not know who this person is?
Oh, right. Yeah. I get that. Say, I don't know. And that's, I think, going back to the fishing industry, right? Yeah. You build connections with people where my girlfriend, same thing. I'll be driving down the road and someone will call and it'll be after a tournament or something. And she's like, I've never met that person. How do you know that person? I was at the tournament. It's like, oh yeah, well that's so-and-so that was at a different tournament. He wanted to see how I did and how I was catching him on that jig that he sent me, or, it's just it's a community where it's like, man, you can burn a lot of that time driving on the road, talking to your buddies, which is kind of nice for what you're about to be doing.
Yeah. I burn a lot of cell phone time on the road for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so with Alpha Angler, right? I mean, kind of the thing that put it on the map for me was having Brandon Palanuik rep the rods, right? With that situation, how has that relationship grown? It sounds like you were friends with him before, everything started, but when did you decide, hey, we want to get this guy, he's really blowing up, we want to put him on the map? Or how did that conversation start in the beginning?
It's actually a really good story. So Pollinick and I were buddies. So when I jumped into fishing, I bet I was 30-some years old or 30 years old. And I called him I can't even say it, but it started with punk and ended with arse. He was this young kid, just kicking everybody's butt around here. Uh-huh. But he's a good dude. And we became buddies after that. So, we always stay connected. And then he made the elites, and he's a tinkerer, always wants to work on stuff. And so he'd come home and I'd show him some new stuff we were working on for Alpha. He called and said, hey, he's really driven by not just existing within the environment, existing within bass fishing. He's driven. He wants to be part of it, right? He wants to change it. He wants to manipulate things. He wants to, which isn't always a great thing, because I'll come out and be like, hey, this is the coolest rod. What do you think of this? And then I got to listen to all his opinions, And after 7 or 8 years of being buddies, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Bass pro. You don't get a win because you're the bass pro, okay? But so he called in 2015, which I was saying that was the kind of the point, one of those two things that really drove me into it. Okay. And the best part about that story was when in 2015, I was pretty set up. I mean, I had this awesome job at a cool company. I was getting to fish the Shark Tank every weekend. My kids were in a good school, and I'm like, nah, that risk is too great. I couldn't jump it. You know what I mean? And like I said, through faith and through things that I don't believe are coincidence, I kind of got this fire, like, hey, let's do this. It's a little crazy. Let's do it. Now, when my kids were old enough to kind of see the progression, I wanted them to see me do it. And so I called him back in 2016. I said, hey, changed my mind. I got this all set up. I'm ready to go. Are you in? He goes, no way, dude. My contracts are way too good now. Like, he like totally said no. So I'm like, what? Like, wait a minute. So anyways, we let it kind of fester for a month or two, and we were going to jump without him. I mean, he he's such a good friend, super encouraging. And we were putting everything together, and he called back and he goes, I'm in. And so he was going to be our pro staffer. A lot of the stuff that we had been working on, he was already kind of giving input. Like you said, a bass fisherman wants to talk about bass fishing. And I don't really think he was doing a disservice to any of his sponsors. But if you ask a bass fisherman about what's the best taper for the Nico rig, right? They're going to talk to you irregardless of what
brand
exactly. No, it's got to be fast and extra fast. And they go on. And so the designs were taking shape for what we wanted to launch with. And so he calls and he says he's in. And at that point, I'm in our second team championship. It's the day before our second bass team championship. We'd requalified and got to go back across the country. And I think we were at Kentucky Lake. Anyways. So he's like, hey, he had his plan. He was going to talk to all of his great sponsors. He calls that night, the night before the first day of this team championship. And he's like, I got fired. I said, excuse me? He's like, for the first time in my professional career, I got fired. And I said, for what? And he goes, because I told him I wanted to go with Alpha, and they fired me from the whole platform, all of it, top to bottom.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my God, I'm taking this risk. I'm in the middle of nowhere, about to fish this big tournament, and I just got one of my best buddies fired. You know what I mean? That was the first thought that came to my mind. Oh, this is starting off with a bang. Yeah. And then we bombed that tournament too, and I mean bombed it.
I think I know that Kentucky Lake. It was a team tournament, right? Match team. I think, I don't know if this is correct or not, but one of the guys I compete against around here a lot, and he actually just did shout out to Ty Faber. He just cashed a check in the Costa, or I think it's the Toyota series now on Sam Rayburn. But I think Ty and his dad won that deal from Colorado.
They did.
Yeah. So I know Ty pretty well and fish against him a lot around here. Same thing. We have a lot of team tournaments, that kind of stuff. But that's sweet. Okay. There's a connection there. Another reason why it's just so small.
And, I'll never forget the way they won that tournament. They were fishing these big barge dolphins. Super smart adjustment that they made. And I remember driving home going like, in a cold front, you fish more vertical structure. And, we're out running around fishing ledges like we know how to lead fish. There's no ledge fishing in the Northwest, right? But
no.
Anyways. So, yeah, that's how we got, that was the inaugural, good, we brought Brandon on board and got him fired. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
granted, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and when you said the total package, right? I mean, a lot of these companies have a situation where we need your rods and your reels and anything else that larger organization owns. There's situations like that. Was that what you mean by?
Yeah.
Where he was walking away from the rods, and they said, well, no, we need you for the rods and the reels.
Yeah. I mean, and it was, it was wide ranging, but
yeah.
Long story short, I don't disagree with or argue, if they made a marketing decision, I understand business is business, but it was just one of those situations for us. It was like if you're looking from signs from heaven on your career decisions, these first two weren't so good, right?
Looking pretty downhill right now.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, that's sweet. Well, and we'll kind of get into this now a little bit more. That relationship has grown now to the point where Brandon, you and I had talked off air, has a little bit of ownership in the company. What do you see advantages and I guess things to look forward to with that relationship?
Yeah. So when we started it, we said we never wanted to give ownership away. We really wanted to keep this kind of, like I said, close to the chest or close to the vest. But the idea was that we didn't want it to get muddied, so that it's always going to be about the alphas, and it's always going to be about making, in my opinion, rods that just work, right? And we weren't going to add pretty things on them and stuff like that. And we just felt like if we were to give some ownership away or some equity so that we could grow faster, it would have to really, it could dilute that. But Brandon doesn't think any differently than, he doesn't need, he's all about performance as well.
Yeah. The performance.
And so, about 2 or 3 years into it, he expressed interest in wanting to be part of it and wanting to help it grow. And the good news for us is, now we can work on like a mule, right? Because now it's part of, he doesn't want to see it fail, right?
No, exactly. That was kind of what we were talking about. My point earlier was like, when you give someone, or not give, but when there's equity involved, you're going to work harder for it, right? It's not just a pro staff and a paycheck. And that is a different relationship for every pro and that sponsor, right? Some pro staff are going to want to have a lot of say. Some don't have the time in their fishing tournaments. And this is what I'm representing. But by having it, a dog in the fight, if you will, in my opinion, that person's going to work harder. Any employee owned company versus a simple paycheck, I think you're going to see better results from that employee that has equity.
Yeah, totally. And like with a guy like him, like he'll never mail it in for anybody, but I do think he feels a little bit, like I'll get a phone call. A lot of the phone calls I get sound like this. Jake. Yes, Brandon. So-and-so said they tried to reach out to you and couldn't get a hold of you. And I'm like, I've been in 3 different states in 3 different days, and I apologize. Who is this person? And my better question is, how is it easier for them to get a hold of you than to get a hold of me? And so, like, hey, you really need to get back to this person because he's really concerned about this or that. And I'm like, thanks. You know what I mean? Like, but he's invested in it, and it is a good thing. So
awesome.
Yeah, it's cool to have a guy like him, like to see him from both sides, right? I think a lot of his sponsors see Brandon the angler as the promoter, right? And what he's capable of this, and this, and he's really set, in my opinion, the tone for what a lot of the social marketing looked like before anglers did a lot of it.
Absolutely.
But as a friend, he's more from the other side. And I'm a angler, and I want to fish at the highest level as well. My conversations are less about how does the rods fit into the business. It's more about, hey, would you have landed 2 more of those fish if we would change this, right? I get to talk to him about things like, why would, I think him and I had a 25-minute phone call about the size of a hook and a finesse jig. Yeah, Bill Lowen's finesse jig. The one they sell on Lure Parts Online. I think I talked to him about just the size of the hook for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And what rod would it be? What would be best rod to put that on? So.
Yeah. No, the technicality, getting way deep into the details with him. That's important, right? I mean, he's going to be a guy that's going to be looking into every little possible thing. Right. And to me, you can't find a better person than that.
Yeah, he's not dumb. Like the stuff that I know about e-com and things like that, I've been able to pull that in. But the conversations I feel are holistic, and so he was a good fit, right? Not only is he like one of my best friends, but it was a good fit to put him in there, and it's actually been really good with him working with us. I think he feels more comfortable saying, "Hey, I want to make changes." He definitely is more comfortable, like, "Hey, we're not going to change that,"
Yeah,
we're not doing that. And we're like, wait, before when you were a pro staffer, it'd be like, whatever, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever, Wonder Boy.
Now you got to deal with him.
Yeah, now he's got a percentage in the vote.
I got you. Well, we kind of brushed over this, but being a direct to consumer brand, obviously there's a lot of advantages to that. And then you're not going to have nearly the volume, right? And has that always been the mindset and will continue to be the mindset just with the whole alpha brand in general?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the idea was like, because I was running e-com at Buck, I got to see both. I got to see this iconic brand that was part of the retail based in sales environment, right? Sure. But on the side, you've got this 100-year-old company that's growing also in the e-com channel. And what I saw from the two sides of things kind of really helped me decide what would be best for what we wanted to do. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to make rods that if you got them somewhere else, they'd cost you $500. We were just going to cut out the markup. We don't need the cash flow. If we control this correctly, we won't need a ton of investor cash to to create these rod models, and we can use the best stuff. And by doing that, we could use any stuff. So, I mean, in one of our fishing rods, we have, 3 different brands of guide on the rod, which is, it's like, it's like a, the hodgepodge rod design. You actually look at all the stuff that goes into it, but there was a thought process to every, all of that kind of stuff. And it's really hard to do that on a larger scale. But on the other side of things, there was other companies that were coming up that were doing this, where they were kind of, hey, we'll say direct to consumer. We'll lose some of the benefits that you get from the retail side of things. Mm-hmm. But what we can give you guys back is we can give you in my opinion, like higher dollar products, but they won't cost you as much to do it. So
sure.
We really knew we needed to stay in that. And it's really hard for me because I have really good friends that are tackle shop owners. And as I travel the country and fish all of these places, I meet like the Tackle Trap. This is a shout out to them. That guy runs an amazing tackle shop, and I can't put my products into his tackle shop because he's not going to make any money on them, right?
Yeah.
But I want to support him and do the best I can for him. But our particular model, at least the way Alpha Angler is right now, we just couldn't do that. We want to give it back to the angler. We want to give it to the alphas. If you want a couple rods, they're going to cost you a little bit less. So,
yeah, no. And I think it's a great price point for that kind of a standard, right? I mean, you see a lot of budget $100 rods, and then you see kind of that kind of high level for $500, $600 rods. And it's that quality in a direct to consumer package. And that's where you can kind of get away with it by charging that much.
Yeah, definitely. One of the smartest people I ever worked for at Buck told me one time that success isn't the thing you need to be afraid of. It's actually the growth. And I've really seen that direct to consumer allowed us to grow at a rate that I think was healthy. If we got to a point where we were growing too fast, wherever the corners got cut, they still got cut. And so direct to consumer not only allowed us to deliver what we wanted to our customers, and but it also kind of let us ramp, if that makes sense. And the other added benefit of direct to consumer is the alphas. Like I didn't think it would be, because you met a couple guys and they helped you design a rod and stuff like that. But I mean, there are guys like I watched an interview with Brian New. I don't know if you know who he is, but dude's a hammer. Mm-hmm. And he said that at every level, this day and age in tournament fishing, at every level, everybody's good. Like there's the quality of anglers that we're up against anymore. People are so good. And the people that, the time they put into this sport, that's their passion, they generally have really good information, and it's super good to be talking to them. So in a direct consumer environment, I mean, I try to stay talking, especially the ones that want to talk about stuff. I have a buddy of mine, Matt Conley, mm-hmm. who is a co-angler. And I said, hey, I don't swim bait fish enough. Granted, I've got the Wonder Boy, the swim bait genius, right?
You don't enough. Yeah, you're talking to.
He's super good at it, but I'm like, hey, I need to understand a little bit more about this side of the fishing that I just don't. If I go out and fish a tournament, it's very rare that I'll grab a swim bait.
Yeah.
And so, because of his enthusiasm and his knowledge, he put together like a 5-page essay of like different rods, and he was a swim bait universe guy. And that knowledge would have taken me months to find out what really had value. But he had price points into different products, and then I like bounced it off of Brandon, and then, okay, we're going to make one rod, not 20 of them. We're going to try to make the best wide or glide bait rod. And I had all of these other sources that definitely weren't me. I would not have been able to do it well without the alphas. And so that was the direct model. That like that type or that level of passionate input, we were able to get right in front of it. If you don't have that direct communication line, right, you lose something. It's kind of like the game telephone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you've got a buyer calling you saying, hey, my customers are asking for this, you probably have lost a little bit of that detail that really matters. So
absolutely.
Like I said, that's the part I enjoy the most. Like that, it's like I keep saying, talking about jig hooks for 20 minutes.
For sure. Dude, and like you said, making one swim bait rod. What I kind of noticed is you guys don't have, right? And maybe this goes back to not making anything shiny and all this kind of stuff, right? But you have 15 rods, in total there. A pretty simple lineup when it comes down to a lot of these companies that you see with 5 or 6 different levels of rods, right? And then there's the breakdown for each one of those rods. Is that still kind of maintaining that same brand and mindset of keeping things simple and for the purpose of performance?
Yeah, totally. And the hard thing for us to do would be to say, and I understand why companies make multiple levels of rods, because, you know, in the retail atmosphere, those they can take advantage of that.
Sure.
But you guys, like, everybody knows the president of Alpha Angler's name. They have my email and my phone number, right? If I said for 2 or 3 years, hey, we're doing the best we can to make the very best thing at the cheapest we can, and then I came out with another level, I would be crucified, right? It's just,
for sure.
And yeah, and I don't really want to, right? I feel like if I could make something a little bit cheaper, then I probably should have, right? I should have done it that way in the first place. So that's what, you know, exactly. All performance. There's no reason to make another level. And we've really struggled with this too, making like a signature series.
Sure.
Like, hey, Brandon, let's make a signature series, you know. And he looks at me and he's like, what would we change? You know, like, would we make
his name on it, right?
Yeah, I would put your name, your signature on it, and make it red. Or any of, you know, or any of my West Coast guys, you know, I can make a signature series rod for my Delta guys. Yeah. And what would you change on it? Nothing. I mean, I'm like, you already make it, because I told you that it wouldn't work if you didn't do it this way. So, but the simplicity thing too about rods is, after designing rods for 12 or so many years, when I really got into it, I realized that 90% of what we do as anglers, it fits into a box. A lure size of 3/8 to right around 3/4. In general, most of the hooks are the same diameter. The 10% are your drop shots and your flipping sticks, right? But sure, almost everything we do fits into that lure weight. That lure weight is casted with a particular action. There's not an action that casts a 1/2 ounce better than a 3/8, in my opinion. I mean, there's power differences and length differences, but almost everything we do fits in that kind of that box. Sure. And we tried to stay away from it, and it didn't always happen. But, you know, like, for instance, we make a spinning rod called the wrench. I honestly feel like you could do almost everything with it.
That's why it's called the wrench.
And we didn't exactly. It's got to be in the toolbox. It's got to be in the wrench.
Always have to have a wrench.
Yeah, but so we really wanted to stay in that environment, to, you know, that the meat and potatoes of bass fishing was done with very specific and very effective means, right? You know, like, there is a bass taper that I swear that I can see it with my own eyes now. I've gotten to the point where when I see it, I'm like, that's the one. I can see it when you bend it on the floor. I can see it when you set the hook. You know, if I can apply that in certain different lengths and for different scenarios. But I think that was what we were trying to get at, with just really being simplistic and not using a lot of technique specific stuff. Where that failed was that I got a couple alphas, Jeremy Norris from Louisiana. They fish canals, really tight canals. Okay. And they got to skip a frog under a tree, and a 7/3 is just too much, right? Mm-hmm. And so you get these guys that, you know, they start talking about, hey, can you make this? Can you make that? And so we'd make 1 or 2, and then all the Louisiana guys call them and they want them custom. And so, hey, let's do a rod of the month. Let's make the Power Skipper. This is going to be, a limited run of rod, and we're not going to do it a bunch. But for those guys, you know, that might want to get a hold of one, we'll make a couple of them, and then we'll sell them to these guys. Yeah, that limited run was never limited. Like, everyone's like, dude, you make the Power Skipper? Like,
so yeah, I might use it, even if I'm never going to see, like, but like, hey, you know what if I end up getting in a situation where I need to be skipping under stuff? Here's what I want.
Yeah. My favorite thing to do is to get a group of people to be like, hey, you said that was for skipping frogs, and then have somebody come tell you that they won $20,000 on that rod throwing a spinnerbait. And like, so like, I shouldn't have named it anything, right? Because if you win money on it and it works for what you're doing, then it's, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, take it. I'm glad. I don't ever want you guys to put these things in a box. If you can win on it, just tell me what you're doing, and I'll keep doing it. I'll make more of them. You know what I mean?
It needs to be, you just need to have a toolbox name for all of them, so no one gets confused. Just like the hammer, the wrench, the drill. Right. You just, anything.
The vice grips. Yeah.
Vice grip. Yeah. There you go. The vice grip would be a great, like, 7/3 medium heavy casting rod. Like, you can do everything with it.
Right. If I don't ever lose a 5-pounder again on a particular rod we design, it'll be called the vice grips. Right. It's just, they're not coming off. Yeah, that's true.
And then you need it on a glass rod or something.
Yeah.
Sweet, man. Well, I like that idea too. And I think that you get in a rhythm when you're using a rod consistently. Like all of us have our favorites, right? And I think probably a disadvantage I have is I'm someone who uses a lot of different rod companies. And I think that by doing that, I definitely, if I'm catching them doing something and I have two different rod companies with, like, say, a square bill on this one, and then I have a little bit of a different square bill on this one, that feels a little different when I pick it up and throw it. So I think that sometimes it, with how specialized bass fishing gets, and I think part of it's for the sales, right? If you have someone that's getting new into the sport and they're like, well, I need one of each one of these in case I'm doing this, all these things, like, I think that that's why it's so popular, but I think there's a disadvantage sometimes because you are not used to that muscle memory with that same rod over and over again.
Yeah. Well, like when we first went down that road, and I didn't really have to sell Brandon on it, but Rick Clunn years ago had this article about how he used a 7-foot Bass Pro Shops heavy action for almost everything he did. And I never found that rod, but the theory was that when you use the same rod for the vast majority of what you're doing, the only thing that changes when you switch baits is the bait, right? How that rod feels when you bump it off a log, and how that, the line and all that stuff feels in certain situations, you'll know what it is. And then, so bite detection is super easy. And this is a funny story because as we were making rods, we would say we would try to make the most sensitive rod or the most this or that rod. And when you change a material or change a taper from fast to extra fast, everything feels different. The bite feels different. All of that feels different. And in the sense of performance, and based on the fact that we're all we want to be tournament anglers and we want execution as everything. It was really about, like, if I pick this rod up and it can do 5 of the 10 things I'm going to do that day, I will know, or I will be trained to know when something doesn't feel right, when I got grass on my plug or whatever it is. But that was an old Rick Clunn theory that we kind of tried to carry forward when we made, when we were making rods. It doesn't always work out right. Like like your 10%, like your wide glide for, how to throw a glide bait and stuff like that.
Sure.
But we noticed that, and I got a great story that I'd love to tell guys about punching rods.
Okay.
We made this punching rod, and I used the best graphite, Torre level, highest grade graphite you could buy. And we're really big on sensitivity. We're really big on what makes a rod sensitive, and we have all of our theology on it and stuff. Got video after video talking about it. But it really isn't about as much about the material as it is about the holistic design of the rod. Well, I made this rod out of the best stuff you could make, and I into a theory, I overbalanced it. And I gave it to a couple of the best punchers I know, guys that used it in the Delta. And they sent them back, and they're like, no, this is the dullest. I remember seeing, like, this is the most insensitive rod I've ever used. And so they're like, what?
Do you understand what I put in that rod, man?
I just could not fathom it. And this was before we took it for real. But it was more about the sensitivity in what they were doing, the way that the rod was actually balanced. We actually made it to balance. It was overbalanced. So you could say that it was tip positive. Okay. And the flipping technique, and we were like trying to figure out, like, what the heck did we do wrong here? And we actually found an old video of Greg Hackney talking about how his flipping rods are a tad bit tip heavy. And, long story short, that his thought process. So I made the same rod for those guys with the worst material. I mean, it was a test, right? An A/B test. Yeah. Us engineers will do that. And just mildly tip heavy, send it all back out, rave reviews. This is the most balanced rod, or no, what is it? This is the most sensitive rod you've ever made, Jake. It was just like, wow. But you wouldn't know, right? That feedback was necessary for them. Everything on paper, if you were to put the engineer documents to it, I sent them the bestest thing they could have ever bought.
Yeah.
And they hated it. And so that feedback was super necessary.
Yeah. Well, that's an attest to what you have going with the alphas, right? That's not a situation that can always be figured out on the front end and that quickly. It just shows that you got to have that real world testing, especially in the fishing rod world.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's necessary. I mean, I'm sure there's other people that can glean that information, but not me. I gotta get on the phone, I guess.
Sure. Well, man, we've been going here for 50 minutes. As a closing to the show, we'll kind of wrap things up here. But I always want to ask your personal best and where you caught it, a largemouth, a smallmouth, and maybe a spotted bass if you caught a spotted bass.
Personal best,
And
largemouth.
okay. Uh-huh.
It's actually a really good story.
Let's hear it.
This is fishing the Columbia River, which is known for smallmouth.
Uh-huh.
And it's back when the chatterbait came out. You know, Brian thrifted already run $1.5 million on it, but we were just learning about it. And I think Luke Clausen said throw it on a glass rod. I can't remember how we heard about it. So I had spooled this thing up with a rebound, back our very first rebound, the glass cranking rod we have.
Okay.
And I set the hook on this thing, and it was a 903. And my team partner was like, "You got one?" I said, "Yeah, I do." And it doesn't feel very big. And the theology behind that is I didn't crack him real hard, so he was just kind of, you know, mildly upset. When he got close to the boat, one, we're fishing for smallmouth, and I got a 9-pound largemouth on, and and two, I had let it come all the way to the boat, and my partner didn't have the net. You know, he's like, "What are you doing?" When he sees this thing, he's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah,
it's a 3-pounder. You know, it was chaos out of the gate.
Oh,
But the best part of that whole story is the Columbia River in the Northwest with a 903. We didn't win the tournament with 26 pounds, and I didn't get big fish.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Shark Tank.
That is it. Oh my gosh. And I've heard that from Jacob Wall was on the podcast a little bit earlier, and he talked about the Columbia River being just an unbelievable fishery. And then there's been some Bass Nation tournaments up there. So Colorado guys have talked about same kind of deal, like caught a 713 on a buzzbait, like a big northern strand largemouth. That's crazy, dude. The fish in that thing. That's incredible. I really wish that and hope that one day we could see a Western swing of some of the big major tournament coverage up there.
Yeah, I think that a lot of guys are pushing forward. Like everyone up here, their heart was broken when, you know, there was a lot of shifts in the industry and the elites couldn't come here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I was so excited. I just would like to see those guys at their level break down something I'm so comfortable with, right? That I know so well. Or I feel like I know really well. Just watch them come back and totally show me what I don't know about fishing, you know. But
exactly.
I have faith it'll happen. I hope so. I hope that the MPFL, if I have my way, the MPFL guys, they'll probably be like, "Man, what is that noise in my ear about the Columbia River so constantly?" And that'll be me.
Yeah, that's you. You got to represent your Western guys, man.
Yep.
That's sweet. Okay, now your smallmouth, biggest smallmouth you've got.
Coeur d'Alene Lake, I think it was a 603. Another great story because I caught a 603 and I think I had 25 pounds, 26 pounds, and Wonder Boy beat me.
Classic.
Classic Wonder Brandon. I think he had a 656 and 2 absolute heathen largemouth. So,
wow. Yeah. Dude, that's another one of those, like, the fish that come out of those places, just like you're putting, I mean, people, like you said, have put it on the map, but like, just more and more people talking like this, they've got to make room to some of those lakes, you know, these larger tournaments.
Yeah, no, we have amazing fisheries up here. It's really cool.
Yeah. And now spotted bass. I know you said not much spotted bass going around you, but did you catch any big ones on the, you know, in the opens this last year or out in California?
You know, spotted bass, I'm going to put it right in there. Then that like 2 to 2.25 pounds is my big one.
Gotcha. Probably on like the drop shot.
Yeah, the first big event when I decided, all right, I'm leaving the Shark Tank. I got that bloodthirsty, want to fish different places and see. You know, we have an amazing country. You know, you don't even have to tour the world to see amazing stuff. Our country's so cool.
Yeah.
But going from different parts to different states, and the very first one I did was I jumped into an FLW on Shasta, and I might as well have been fishing on Mars. I remember that. I think I weighed the smallest limit for 5 fish that's ever been recorded in the history. And I was like, this is dumb spots. Everybody's telling me there's 9-pounders in here, and I can't catch 5 pounds for 5. Yeah.
There's so many fish in that lake, man.
Oh, it's a cool lake too.
Yeah, I've never been. I've just heard a lot, and I'd love to make a trip up there sometime because it's one of those things where some of those giant spots can play with a swim bait, you know. And if you stick one of those in a day, everyone else is catching 2-pounders and you catch a big one, you can really add a lot to your bag.
Yeah, this is a cool place. Beautiful too. Just a cool area.
Absolutely. Well, man, you know, thanks for taking the time out. I guess the last thing that I'm asked guys is with all that you've kind of done at this point in the outdoor industry and in the fishing industry. What is your biggest piece of advice to someone looking to either start their business or work in the industry with wherever they may end up?
I don't think the advice I would have is probably nothing new, right? Like if you love what you do, then going to work isn't hard, right? It's that barrier, right? For me, it's, I got a couple kids and I'm, we're married and stuff like that. And the barrier was finances. Like, is this risk, is this risk crazy? But if you're happier, it's like you find your way. You know what I mean? It's nothing new. For me, it's faith-based, right? I knew that I was taken care of if I was doing what I loved, and I was on that right track. But I swear the barrier to entry is fear of failure and fear of having nothing. And don't fear failure if you're passionate about it. Actually, fear the success. Like don't fear anything. But obviously, the success will probably be harder to handle than the failure, because if you really love it, then what happens with fishing becomes. I'm more afraid of fishing becoming a job, and which it hasn't. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But my advice is, you only live once. I totally wanted my kids to see me do this. They're at an age where I think they can kind of take it in. Because I want them to get through their lives and be like, hey, I watched Dad go down this crazy tangent, right?
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I think it's just, you got to get over the hump. But if you're not bored, if you don't feel like you're going to work when you go to work every day, it's gonna be good. You're gonna pull it off, whatever it is you're chasing after.
Awesome, man. I think that's some incredible advice. How can guys follow along with Alpha Angler and everything that you're doing, and obviously NPFL coming up?
MPFL. I know if Brad lets me off the hook, my angler profile isn't going to be Jake Boomer Fishing. It's going to be Alpha Angler. He may not accept it. But
That'd be so cool. That'd be really
I was like, hey, where's his angler spotlight page? And it'd be the alphas. The alphas are the ones that I'd rather point the finger at. But alphaangler.com is obviously how to get is where our website is. And we also have, social media stuff that we try to stay up on it and keep up on it. Obviously, we've been so busy with the changes going on and the COVID stuff that we're trying to catch back up. I've actually hired a social media guy to kind of help us out a little bit.
Nice.
So, yeah. Alphaangler.com.
Alphaangler.com. And guys, I will link that in the YouTube as well as the show notes for the podcast. Jake, have a great rest of your night, man. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about Alpha Angler.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate you guys having me. Thanks, Adam.
Yep. Have a good one.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks, guys, for sticking around. Man, what an incredible show with Jake. That was awesome. You can definitely tell he has the passion, and just a really incredible company to me, and unique in the rod business for sure, to be a small, I guess, non-giant producer, right? And when it comes to rods, you see, it seems like having that retail space, being a direct consumer is awesome. So incredible job that Jake has done with Alpha Angler, and I'm excited to see what's in his future with the NPFL. And guys, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review or sharing the podcast with a friend, that'd be incredible. And look for us now on YouTube with Business from the Bass Boat YouTube channel. These are going to be streamed from now on, and we'll get an extra platform in there. So thanks, guys, and have a great rest of your week.